Now I would request our High Commissioner from South Africa, Francis Morule, to come and address you very briefly. So over to High Commissioner Morule.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be part of an initiative that epitomizes the human spirit and carry on the legacy created by the icon Nelson Mandela. The 18th of July 2016 would have been Nelson Mandela's 98th birthday. The South African former president and one of the world's most iconic leaders believed in public service, and every aspect of his life was in service to others. In 2009, the United Nations, inspired by Nelson Mandela's 67 years of public service, declared his birthday the International Nelson Mandela Day, where all communities serve in whatever capacity they can for 67 minutes. By devoting 67 minutes of your time, 1 minute for every year of Mandela's public service, people are called to make a gesture, big or small, of solidarity with humanity. For 67 years, Nelson Mandela served as a lawyer, educated at the University of Fort Hare. Seeing the suffering of black people, noting the blatant discrimination, he joined the liberation movement and became an active participant in politics. Eventually, Mandela would serve a 27-year prison sentence in defending his belief in democracy, and would be known by his jailers and fellow prisoners as an inspiration. During his prison sentence, Mandela was known to encourage all to continue their education study as a form of empowerment, regardless of their circumstances. One of the fundamental imperatives to building a great nation was the investment in children and their future. And I quote him, "Our children are the rock on which our future will be built, our greatest asset as a nation. They will be the leaders of our country, the creators of our national wealth, who care for and protect our people." End of quotation. The icon believed in the next generation and the responsibility of all to ensure that their future was secured. And I quote him once again, "We understand and promote the notion that while children need to be guided, they also have an entrenched right to be whatever they want to be, and that they can achieve this only if they are given the space to dream and live out their dreams." End of quotation. One of the ways in ensuring that sacred future was through education. Education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this day encourages communities all over the world to perform reminiscent of the acts performed by this great icon, Dr. Nelson Mandela. Across the world, schools, business organizations, community organizations, cultural organizations, religious organizations participate in projects in support of the various themes, be it education and literacy, food security or shelter, or the environment. Nelson Mandela was known to have been inspired by Mahatma Gandhi Ji in his endless quest to achieve the democratic right of all. Now, a young Mandela was appointed as the volunteer-in-chief during the campaign which was known as the Defiance Campaign. This campaign was meant to defy all unjust apartheid and racist laws in South Africa, and he became the volunteer-in-chief. Now, what they did in South Africa, there were places which were reserved only for white people. And it was a criminal act for people of color, for non-white persons, to be found in those places. A restaurant would be divided in two spaces. One space with a small window would be reserved for non-whites, just to buy and leave. They were not allowed to enter through the door of that restaurant. It's only white people who would be allowed to enter through the door and sit and order through the menu like proper human beings and be served. Even trains. That is why Mahatma Gandhi Ji was thrown out of a train, because he sat in a compartment which was reserved for white people. And he demanded his right to sit there, because he had bought a first-class ticket. And he said because he had bought that ticket, he was equally entitled to sit there. And the white racists threw him out of that train. Even at the beaches, at what would be regarded as a natural space for everyone to access, there would be sections only reserved for white people and the rest for non-white people. Black and white children did not have access to same education. White children had access to quality education, and it was by law. One of the apartheid laws established what was called Bantu education. That was education reserved for non-white students. And the apartheid regime had a powerful police force whose main duty was to suppress dissent. Any voice which objected to the discriminatory laws of colonialism and apartheid was suppressed by the apartheid police. And as a result, many non-white people, including Indian leaders, were served with burning orders. And let me explain a burning order. When a person is subjected under a burning order, it means that person is not allowed to meet with other persons, anyone other than members of that person's family only. If you are seen talking to any one person, that would be regarded as a violation of the burning order. And that person will then be sentenced to direct imprisonment. So such was the vicious nature of the apartheid system. Now, after the Defiance Campaign of 1952, which was a resounding success. And during that campaign, black and white compatriots in South Africa united as a force to fight against the apartheid system. What is equally important to note is that the struggle against racism in South Africa was a non-racial struggle. That's the point I'm trying to make out. It was a non-racial struggle. People from different races united to fight against a common enemy, that was apartheid colonialism. And I'm talking about Africans united with Indians, united with some of our white compatriots. After the resounding success of the Defiance campaign, Mr. Mandela and his other compatriots took a decision that we are united against this inhuman system. Now it is the time for us to sit down, to walk across the length and breadth of South Africa, to consult very widely across the political divide, to consult with women's organizations, children's formations, religious institutes, the academic community, labor organizations, business organizations, and so on and so forth, sporting organizations as well, to come out with the answer to the question, what kind of South Africa do we like to achieve? Do we like to replace the racist and colonial South Africa? And that is why South Africans from all walks of life congregated in 1955. They met in Johannesburg in 1955 to come and respond to that question. What kind of South Africa do we like to see, replacing the unjust and inhumane colonial and apartheid system? And that congregation was called the Congress of the People, because all sections of South Africa were represented during that Congress. And they came up with a document called the Freedom Charter. And the Freedom Charter has got 10 clauses. And those clauses are as follows. Clause 1 says, the people shall govern. Clause 2 says, all national groups shall have equal rights. Clause 3 says, all shall share, the people shall share in the country's wealth. The fourth clause says, the land shall be shared amongst those who work it. Clause number 5 says, all shall enjoy equal human rights. Clause number 6 says, all shall be equal before the law. Clause number 7 says, there shall be work and security. Clause number 8 applies to yourselves. It says, the doors of learning and culture shall be opened. And clause number 9 says, there shall be houses, security, and comfort. Clause number 10, which is the last clause, says, there shall be peace and security. And the reason why I'm able to recite the Freedom Charter It is because also I grew up in the freedom struggle. So we had to internalize it. Because that is a vision which informed the freedom struggle of South Africa. And today, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa is based on the Freedom Charter. That is the foundation for one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. Clause 10 of the Freedom Charter says, there shall be peace and friendship. Today, we are living in the world which has become unsafe to live in. We are living in a world that the violence has become a common feature in our daily lives. When we switch on our televisions, when we watch the news, when we read newspapers, when we listen to the radios, the headlines are about violence. We are united against terrorism, the scourge of terrorism. We condemn terrorism in all its manifestations. That's what we do. But Madiba always maintained that yes, we must unite against acts of violence, against acts of cowardice. But he also said, it's not enough just to fight terrorism, to condemn it or to oppose it. But we must also deal with the causes of terrorism in order to find a lasting solution for peace, so that the world can become a peaceful and a better place for all of us to live in. And ladies and gentlemen, it is for that reason that South Africa is at one with India in calling for the reform of the organs of the United Nations. In particular, of the Security Council and other Bretton Woods institutions. Now, Bretton Woods institutions are those institutions which were created, like the United Nations, after the Second World War. Those were institutions which were created in response to the aftermath of the Second World War, so that there should not be a repeat, so that humanity should not experience another World War. And those institutions we recognize and we acknowledge that for a long time they have served their purpose. But what we're saying today, those institutions must be transformed to also reflect the demographics of the world. Must be transformed in order to be able to respond to the challenges, to the modern day challenges, to the challenges of our times. We cannot have a country such as India with 1.2 billion people not represented in the Security Council. And we cannot have Africa as a region with 1 billion people not reflected, not represented in the Security Council. So we're saying those institutions, including the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and so on, must begin to reflect the aspirations of the developing countries. It is only then that they can be more responsive to our needs. Now, as I'm stepping down, I would like briefly to touch on a legacy which Madiba, as we affectionately called him, left for us. And it is his capacity to forgive. Notwithstanding the fact that he spent 27 years in prison. Upon his release, Madiba called for South Africans to forgive each other and to reconcile. Because he said, we are not going to change South Africa for the better if we still have hatred in our hearts. Because if you carry hatred in your heart, you will remain a prisoner for the rest of your lives. So, ladies and gentlemen, with these few words, I wish us a very fruitful Nelson Mandela International Day, wherein we shall spend this day doing our public service. And in his own words, Madiba, he appealed that let us not devote only the 67 minutes on his birthday to public service, but let's make every day of our lives a Nelson Mandela Day. Thank you very much.